back to my channel. Yay! So this is going to be my first reading wrap-up, which will be for the month of December 2016. So not in any particular order. The first book I read was Watership Down by Richard Adams. And I have to say, this is going to be a reread and a reread and a reread, and I will read this until the day I die. It's definitely one that's going to be a permanent fixture on my shelf. I'm probably going to buy extras and give them out as gifts. I want everyone to read this. I'm so glad that I heard about this on another channel, because it's really what pushed me to buy this and try it out. I actually bought it back in May, and I put it down on around page 63, and I picked it back up, and I finished it in 2 days' time. I finished the remaining 400 plus pages. So really, this is a great book. It's about rabbits who are leaving their home because they sort of have a seer among them that predicts something bad's going to happen. And so a few rabbits, they trust him, and even though he can't give them specifics, and they decide to leave with him in search of a new home. So this is really all about their journey and like the things they run into. There's bad rabbits and predators and things, and it's just like an epic adventure story all centered around rabbits and them trying to establish a new home. I know it may not sound too compelling when I say it like that, but trust me, this is an excellent book. This guy, Richard Adams, excellent writer. If he can make a story out of rabbits, it's got to be good. One of the main things that I personally love about it is the rabbits are real. They're not Redwall type animals, if you're familiar with that. They're not having sword fights. They're not having tea time. They're not getting married. They don't get married. They view, the opposite sex is purely like utilitarian. Like, I think they form bonds, but it's more centered around breeding, procreating. They take part in like normal rabbit activities, but they also have their own language, which is really cool. It kind of just adds to their depth. So they're human-like in a way, but he didn't take it so far away. And I really appreciate that they're still real rabbits, and everything that you read in this book is from their point of view. And it just ends up being a really compelling, good story. So I encourage everyone, I'm passing along the torch, the Watership Down torch. Everyone read this book. It will surprise you, I promise. The second book, Mistress of the Art of Death by Ariana Franklin. And we share a last name, FYI, but that's not why I got this. Actually, I never picked up this book. This was an assigned college book to my husband, and it's been on our shelf for years, and I finally picked it up. But this takes place in medieval times. I think the year is like 1170 something or 1157. The main character is a woman doctor, which is strange enough for the time being. So really, like, she could be hanged basically at any moment, because woman doctors, medieval times, it just doesn't happen. So that made it really interesting. It's about this woman doctor, and she's been brought in with another man and then a eunuch, and they're coming in to Cambridge, and they're investigating the deaths of 4 children that have been like brutally murdered. And the Jews are being blamed, and they're kind of being held captive. They've rounded up the Jews, and they're holding them captive because they think the Jews are behind it. So King William Plantagenet, or is it Henry? Sorry, King Henry Plantagenet. He asked the King of Sicily to bring in these investigators, or doctor, that he says, send your best doctor that would be able to look at these bodies and be better able to determine how they died. So he wants to know who's killing these kids, and right now the Jews are to blame. So she comes in, and she is kind of like a coroner of sorts. She's used to studying dead bodies, but she's also a doctor, but she really specializes in dissecting corpses and finding the cause of why people died. So she's brought in to solve this mystery. So it's kind of like a murder mystery set in medieval times with a woman doctor. It is a good book. It was pretty good. I finished it in about a week. The only issues I really had with it were the woman doctor part. Not that I don't think that's great. I'm glad it was a woman doctor set in medieval times, so she already has enough against her. She has to come in like under a guise, like she's not really the doctor. One of the men that comes with her, he plays the doctor, but she's the real doctor. But the issue I have is I frequently forgot that it was supposed to be set in this time period. I forgot what time period we were in. Like, just reading the book, I'd have to remind myself, oh yeah, you know, it's 1150 something or something like that. It was really easy to forget because you just kind of get caught up in the murder mystery and there's not enough going on in there to keep pointing you back to, oh yeah, this is what makes it really cool and compelling because it's medieval times and there's not supposed to be woman doctors. I mean, every now and then it would get thrown in there, kind of like, hey, remember, this woman's a doctor and it's medieval times, but that was the main issue I had with it. Overall, pretty good. And it was interesting. I'm glad I picked it up. No regrets. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I reread The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I feel so bad. I want to like this book. I read it when I was in middle school. I was maybe 14 or 15. I picked this up and I read it because everyone raves about it. I didn't like it. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't really compelling for me. I very easily put it down and would forget about it and then have to remind myself, oh yeah, you're reading The Hobbit. Go back and pick it up. And I hate that it was like that for me because I love Harry Potter, The Mists of Avalon, the Song of Ice and Fire series. I like all those books, so it would just make sense that I would like this book. But I didn't. I hate that I didn't, and I'm sorry. Don't come after me with pitchforks, please. I am going to try, again, to read some more of his books, because I've heard this one maybe is a little slow, like it's the more boring of them. So I'm going to try. I'm going to try again. I promise. I want to give this a good shot. I want to like them. But yeah, overall, I just wasn't invested in the story or the characters' lives. It was good. It picked up pace in the end, and I started being more like, oh, what's going on? But it shouldn't take, you know, the last 75 pages or so to get me interested. And I take the blame for that. It's my fault. Everyone loves this, and I don't, and I'm sorry. Next book that I read was The Wilderness World of John Muir, or Muir. I think it's Moore, but correct me if I'm wrong, please. It's just a selection from his collected work. I started this at the beginning of the month, and I finished it at the end of the month. Not because it was bad. It was really beautifully written. I loved reading this. But it was more something to chew on slowly. You didn't want to... It's just excerpts from his journal. You know, you're not trying to find out what happens next. So it was just read a passage, chew on it. Read it slowly, sip tea. I would have loved if I had read this in the summertime and been able to sit outside among nature, since that's, you know, what this book is all about, is his thoughts and feelings and journeys and mountain climbing, a lot of it through nature. It was good. It was good. It was a nice something to mull over. It was just relaxing. I would get a cup of tea. I would sit down with my John Muir, and I would just read a couple passages. What's nice about this is that when you're reading this, you didn't know you could get so interested and entranced by a sequoia tree or a Douglas fir squirrel or whatever it was. I liked reading things from his point of view, how he saw the world, and like a tree or a squirrel or this little bird that lived near the waterfalls. I think it was called an ousel or an ouzel. But he just studied them so closely, and it feels like you're just looking at the world through his eyes, through his lenses. You're just zeroing in on all these little details, and he puts them in here so beautifully. And the fact that he can write pages and pages about a single type of tree and make it interesting. I don't know if he intended to do that. It was just more of, I think, his personal journaling type thing. But he wrote it beautifully, and I'm so glad that his work was collected and, you know, made into books and memoirs that we can read today. He was really big into leaving the wild things wild. You know, he didn't like it when people would come in, and for his time, I feel like this was a little unique. He didn't like it when people would come in and like hunt down all the deer or just mow down all the trees for lumber. So he was a really big voice at the time behind conserving, you know, national parks and things like that, and just really, he saw the value in it at the time, whereas, you know, a lot of people were, there's an abundance, take what we want. I really enjoyed reading things from his perspective and just getting lost in nature through a book, which this book did a good job of. So I really enjoyed it. Nice, relaxing nature read. The last book I read this month, I actually squeezed it in at the end of the month, and it is Goat, a memoir by Brad Land. So, a true story. The author, he suffers a really brutal carjacking assault, and then not long after that, he goes on to college. He was going to just a college in his hometown, but he goes to Clemson University. He follows his younger brother there. He's sort of in his younger brother's shadow, I guess. He's the older brother, but he's the more awkward, creative type, whereas his younger brother is more attractive, better with girls, more athletic. You can tell that him and his brother have always been close, despite their differences. And so it's really hard on him when his brother goes off to the university. So he decides he's going to go too, especially when his brother tells him about joining a fraternity and how much fun it is and how cool it is. And I think Brad didn't want to lose that connection with his brother. So even though he wasn't interested in joining a fraternity, he does it to be close to his little brother again, because apparently they've been close their whole life. So he's going to college with these issues, you know, this PTSD pretty much from his assault, and he enters into more assault type things by trying to join his brother's fraternity. I can't say this was a good book. It was gross and horrible, and I know it's meant to be that way. It wasn't supposed to be pleasant, but the way it's written, you're in his mind. It's just one constant stream of consciousness by Brad Land. So you're following like his random scattered thoughts and, you know, the things he is experiencing. And it just wasn't a nice place to be. I didn't enjoy being in this book. I got in it, but I didn't enjoy being there. FYI, at one point I gagged reading about one of the hazings one of the other pledges was going through, and I have no idea if this is how it really is in college. I hope this isn't the norm. If it is, we have a lot of young men and women either very sadistic and disgusting people, or they have some serious PTSD from college. And that's really sad. One of the main critiques I have of this book is the main character, Brad himself. Despite all the horrible things he goes through in the book, I didn't really like him. I know I was supposed to feel sorry for him. I think that's the point. You're supposed to feel bad that he's been assaulted. He has PTSD from that, and then he basically experienced more assault at college in order to get closer to his brother, even though they've just become more estranged, because that's kind of played into it by the fraternity, is to keep the brothers apart, sort of. But I didn't feel bad for him that much. He annoyed me. I didn't like his desperation when it came to women. He was already awkward and sort of weird in the beginning, and I don't want to be mean to someone who's been assaulted, but you get a sense that he was already that way. So I don't know if the assault really, it didn't have anything to do with his attitude with women. It wasn't disgusting or perverted. It was more like, hello, I just met you. I love you. I could see myself marrying you. And FYI, that's a huge turnoff. Even reading it in a book, it's annoying and a big ugh. So yeah, I mean, I was into it. I finished it in less than a day. It was horrifying, but not really horrifying in a good way, I guess, because it is a true story. So overall, it was okay. Warning, if you do want to read this, it's not really about goats, by the way, but if you do want to read this, I think at one point I counted 10 curse words on one page, and that was like about the average amount. So if you don't like reading that or become offended easily by reading just really graphic things and getting into the minds of sadistic college men, then don't read this, because that's where you'll end up, and it's not a good place to be. So yeah, that's what I read in December 2016. I feel pretty accomplished, especially for it being the month of December that I read this many books, and my first wrap up that I was able to share a good number with you. So yeah, if you liked it or you read any of these books and you want to talk to them about me, please do. That's why I'm here. Comment below, hit like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. And I'll see you guys next time, okay?